So I really just was interested in this big overarching inquiry question this year, going into this year as a teacher, of what does curiosity look like in the classroom? How can you foster it with kids, and what does it look like when you're delivering instruction around curiosity? And so some things have emerged. This is the middle of November so far, and I wanted to just talk into them. One phrase that I talked about last year in one of my lessons that sort of is sticking and moving in a weird direction with curiosity is this idea of expecting to connect, expect to connect. And so it's a big skill, making connections in reading, but I've imagined how using expect to connect can be something that we're using in all the different things that we do. And so with that also comes this big inquiry sort of method of instruction, and asking questions like, how does this fit with that, and why? And just letting kids be a little bit freer to explore what were some of the things that I was wanting to experiment with this year. And then with that, I've been looking into colleagues who've been showing me some different challenge-based learning projects so that we can start to see the relevance of the work that we do in this classroom as permeating outside of these walls. How is what we're doing affecting the world around us? And so we're looking at how to do that. I haven't really gotten into a project yet, but I'm thinking about ways that the work we do in here is leading in that direction. And then some other tools that I've been using along the way that have been helping me and the students access making connections and asking questions have been Wordle, which was just a tool, just a technology tool in and of itself. It's just a word cloud. But one of the ways I used it this year was a colleague who had spent 5 weeks in China came back with this idea. She had learned about self-study and turning homework and assignments into self-study as opposed to just assigning things for kids to do at home that extended their work, but actually having them drive more of the work that they do outside the classroom as homework and extended learning. And so one of the things I did that exploded was I used exit cards one day to just ask my kids, what are you curious about, or what do curious people do? That was actually the question. What do curious people do? And so I got all of these different answers, which I then typed into a text. And then I cut and pasted the text into a word cloud, Wordle.net. And I showed them how it shows how many times something has been said bigger than the things that have been said less times. And so they got so excited about Wordle that I said, part of your self-study this week is just to experiment with Wordle. Go find out what it can do, try cutting and pasting text, creating different word clouds, which they did, and I didn't make it a requirement that they turn one in, but it started happening. And so that's one way that I've been accessing Expect to Connect and asking questions and figuring things out. And then text sets was another. And so I've been asking kids to make connections across text, and I've been introducing text sets, which is just simply taking 3 texts, which could also be a video text or an image or a book or any kind of text that would be connected in some way, and asking them to try to make these connections. Sometimes with a lens, like for example, one of our compelling issues, which is rules, restrictions, and rebellions. We can look at texts and how they're connected that way, or we can just expect to connect across text. Let me show you around this room and show you how this actually looks on the walls with some of the work that we've done. So this is the wall of Wordles that started to emerge in my classroom after the brief experimentation through self-study that I introduced to class. And you can see that it's part of what's turning into our Be the Change board, which one of the things I wanted to do before we could be the change in the world was just to get beyond this idea of we do things for grades only. And so by doing this open-ended kind of assignment, I wanted to just see how many students would bite. And so many of them have, you can see, and this was not graded, but this is work that they were inspired to do. For example, somebody wanted to see, we had done some work, reading work around the song Blowin' in the Wind by Bob Dylan. Somebody wanted to see that song inside of a Wordle and said this: I was inspired to create this Wordle because I was curious to see how it would turn out. And then somebody put in the song lyrics of We Are the World because they wanted to see the big ideas that Michael Jackson had when writing that song, some more work that we had done with that. Somebody created a science wordle from one of their science experiments, cutting and pasting one of their science experiments in. Somebody else wanted to see what their report from last year would look like if they put it in a wordle. And every day, almost every day, I feel like I'm getting a new wordle with some new way of a student figuring out how to make sense of it. So the very first project that we did in class, we didn't outline the parameters like a cookie cutter assignment. One of the things that we did was we looked at how letting your light shine with the 5 C's looks like not always knowing exactly how your light's going to shine, not how you're going to use your five C's. So we started out by actually finding out what intelligence we had, and then we also looked at the Apple ad from a few years ago about all of these people who think different, and think different is an overarching theme in our 6th grade core team. And so we looked at the Apple ad, which talks about the crazy ones, the misfits, the troublemakers, the round pegs who don't fit in the square holes, and people like Muhammad Ali and Gandhi and Jim Henson and John Lennon and Frank Sinatra and Johnson. And we asked the students to research them and to find out who, they didn't have the name of their think different person, who that person was and what they're going to find out about them for a presentation the next day. And what happened is that students figured out their own way of researching, and then after they had done that work, we went back and looked at all of the different ways that students had learned from each other then of how to research going into the rest of the year. And it was so much more powerful than giving them a list of 10 things to do to find out this person, or giving them the name of the person right away and saying, go find out 3 facts about this person. Right away we wanted to give our students this message of inquiry and figuring things out and solving their own problem. So another thing that a colleague and I have been experimenting with is something we're calling Wondering Wednesdays, where students, we realized, didn't have any time to really delve into the resources that teachers always have all around the classroom as sort of inspirational resources that they weren't given a chance or had time to really look at. And so we created time on Wednesdays, whether it be a 20-minute session or a 45-minute session, where students could just be driven by their wonder. First time that I did this, I gave them a little bit of direction to say, you might just wonder and think about words. We had just established some word banks in our classroom, and I knew that kids were excited about words. The things that many of them chose to do on Wondering Wednesdays was to add to the class word banks. And so they went looking through all of the class materials and resources and found some new words. And then afterward, we signed kids up to present a word of the day in any way they chose, with either explaining it through a cartoon or explaining it through a piece of text that they gave context from that they had been reading, or to even imagine it as a Wordle, or how it could fit into any other area of curricular study that we've been working on so far. So you can see that as students are adding to these word banks, our word banks are like words that percolate in my brain, words that further my thinking, which I need to find a definition for. Our apprenticeship words, which come from inquiry that we do around writing. Words that move my heart, words that are music to my ears, and words that roll off my tongue, and they have a choice for where they want to put the word. They found the words in all different kinds of places. Places like books that they normally wouldn't have as much time to spend on, like our social studies books. And they found words in a book called 100 Words Middle Schoolers Should Know. They just picked that up. They also spent some time not always just looking at words. In that time, there was somebody who pulled this off and said, I want to look at Egypt because we've been studying Egypt and I want to know what a map looks like. And they finally had time to look at It's a Big, Big World Atlas books. Some of them wanted to look through books like Icons, which I noticed one of my boy readers wanted to, he just asked, can I look at this book because I want to know how different musicians have made a difference in the world, and there's several musicians in this Icons book. So you can see that Wondering Wednesdays fosters this idea of curiosity, and we also are growing our vocabularies while we're doing